Hello and welcome to Discourse of Peacocks, where today we are going to be discussing yet another win at Elland Road for Leeds United. Leeds United 2, Norwich City 0. A game which started emphatically with a goal within the first minute of the game. And with that, we were all on the edges of our seats thinking that we were going to get an absolute barnstorm thriller of a game. It didn't quite turn out that way, but we got the job done when in previous games, in previous Leeds United teams, we have fallen to teams that are way below our level. And that's not meaning to be insulting towards Norwich City. That's just noticing the fact that obviously they're without so many first team players that if we hadn't have won that game, it would have been an embarrassment on Leeds United rather than a shame on any of the Norwich City players. So let's get straight into it, obviously, with the good. So today we've got the good, the bad, and the records. So let's start, as always, with the good. As I mentioned, we scored within the first minute. The time on the board, as I was watching, was 33 seconds to be precise. With an unexpected goal, me and my husband were still nattering. My husband didn't even realise the game had kicked off. I'd seen Melier had it, so I was very, we're used to a slow build up, so I didn't expect anything. And then all of a sudden, we were both looking at the screen like, we've just, what? Huh? We've just scored. and and so we've waited for the replay and we're like, oh my God, I, I I feel cheated. We weren't able to like authentically celebrate because of the fact that we already knew that we'd scored. But it was absolutely, on watching it was a great ball from, a great interchange between Aronson, Bogle, Dan James. Dan James obviously then crosses it into Solomon, who meets it in the middle, and really not an easy finish either. The keeper Gunn made it easier, but the defenders didn't make it as easy as it could have been for Solomon. But all of a sudden, bam, we were in there, and I could not have thought of a better way to start what could have been a bit of a banana skin because everything was so in favour of us in terms of the Norwich having so many first team players out. They weren't starting Josh Sargent because obviously it's only his second game back since I think October. I think that we just really had everything was setting us up to leads it up in a way of, we were at home. We had unexpected starters, with Aronson and Solomon, considering Daniel Farke's presser before the game hinted towards Solomon feeling, a pull in his hamstring, and Aronson obviously having a knock in the first half of the Sheffield Wednesday game, even though he played until the 80th minute, I think, in that game. So the fact that both of them started, we were at home. Norwich were without between 7 and 9, I think, first team players, and so many of their bench options and even their starters were youth players. Essentially, they were incredibly young, and it just had the real bubbling feeling of something that could have turned into a real opportunity to give Leeds a stick to beat ourselves with, and it didn't. And we didn't Leeds it up. We did the simple thing. We scored, and I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that when that game started in the way that it did, that we were going to just the floodgates were going to open. They were all shouting at one another. There was, discontent between the goalkeeper and the defenders, and they didn't have very much at all, to the point where we limited Norwich to 3 shots all game. They didn't have a single shot in the second half, and they had no shots. Again, a team comes to Ellen Road and ends up leaving without having a single shot on target. It's not something that we should be surprised at. We limit them so much. We limit the opposition so much. We just suffocate them and smother them to the point where, yes, in the same night, Burnley scored 5, but we just didn't give them any opportunities. That midfield, that defence, that attacking prowess of Solomon and Dan James and Bogle as well. It meant that Meslier was under no threat. He literally had nothing to do. I think they had 2 or 3 corners. It was no more than 3, but I'm pretty sure it was only 2. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll say they got 3 corners, but that's all they had. They didn't have a single shot in the second half, and I believe they only had something like 4 touches in our box the entire game. So the shots that they did have were having to come from mainly outside of the box, and they just couldn't do anything. We just limited them to just piss poor attempts. And e even though we actually had far less possession than we normally do, we gave them the possession and they did nothing with it. They had the ball, but we were in still complete control of that game. Nobody looked worried, nobody looked concerned. We looked like we were conserving some energy, which obviously is probably the sensible thing when it's a 3-game match week. But I've never seen a team just look so calm and dominant, but without the ball. It kind of goes against everything that you think kind of controlling football is, because by that you think that you have to have the ball, and we didn't. We gave Norwich the ball and they barely passed their own halfway. Like, they barely came out of their own half. They just passed it, and nobody wanted, because they're such a new team in terms of the personnel. They didn't have faith. They didn't have any sort of idea of what to do, of how to connect the back and the front together. They were clueless. So it was no risk giving them the ball because they weren't gonna create anything with it. Um, which is something that we've not really seen. Obviously, I think we have the highest average percent possession of any team in the championship. So the fact that we were willingly giving possession over to a team because essentially we knew that they weren't going to create anything with it. I don't know, that it's something quite astounding. And my husband made a really good point. He said that it felt like it was a dry run for the Premier League in terms of feeling comfortable without the ball, because so many teams look at Burnley. Last season they went from the championship of playing Vincent Company ball in the championship, where they were just dominant and had all of the possession, and then they couldn't go and play that football. They had no idea how to be without the ball because they'd spent a full season just having the ball. Whereas it felt, my husband, it was a really good point, I think, of that he was preparing us for the Premier League, and the fact that the likelihood is there's not going to be loads and loads of games where we are truly dominant, because of the fact that the levels of the Premier League and and the levels of the Championship and the Premier League are just so vastly different. Um, so yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point. Um, Dan James, Solomon, Bogle, again, just rinse and repeat from the Sheffield game. They were just incredible. I absolutely love the dynamic, and I love. I don't know whether any of you've seen. I don't know whether it's his Instagram or Twitter, but Solomon put to his significant other. I think she's called Dana. Dana, I'm sorry this evening, but I love Dan James a little bit more than you. And I just I love that. I love that camaraderie. I love that those kind of relationships are being built. And again, it does feel quite similar to Rodon last year, a lone player coming over here and absolutely giving his all for the club that he's not even in, essentially he came to us to use us for minutes, and that's fine because he's doing a brilliant job for us. But he has no actual ties to Leeds United. He's not contracted to us. He's a Premier League player who just happens to be here for a season. But the fact that he's creating those relationships and the fact that the camaraderie is so brilliant and that everybody just feels good. The vibes around it, I don't want to go all Jesse Marsh about it, but that is good vibes, that kind of positive attitude and that belief and that love of one another creates such a positive attitude that when at some point we do face a little bit of adversity, that team have faith in one another and will be able to kind of G one another up when needed. I thought Ramazani and Nonto were brilliant. I thought Nonto, especially, I want to give praise to him because I've been quite critical of him recently. I thought, he didn't do a great deal, but he certainly looked livelier than he has done over the last few weeks. He looked like his eyes had been quite empty, quite dim, and it looked like they were regaining a little bit of sparkle, and we need that. At this point in the season, this is where it starts kind of getting serious, and we need his kind of his spice. I love a little bit of spice when it comes to these players, and I think the Ramazani, the Nonto, the fact that you can play 70 minutes or 50, 60 minutes with Dan James and Solomon, and then bring on Ramazani and Nonto and Ramazani firing, and Ramazani was very unlucky to not get a goal. It was just moments, and Bogle as well. We did have a lot of chances, and Gunn again for the second time in just over, well, no, just under a year, just over 6 months. He has let 2 goals in. Obviously, last time he let 4 goals in, but he also made some brilliant saves. He made some fingertip saves for Solomon's, for Bogle's one, and he also made a brilliant save for Ramazani's one as well. We're creating the chances, and just a tiny, tiny little bit, and that would have been another goal off the bench for Ramazani, which again, it poses question to Farke, and when is Ramazani going to get on the team? What an absolutely incredible worry to have, how I'm going to fit all of these players on. It's just, yeah, I absolutely love it. I really, really do. It makes me so excited. And I feel really confident in this team. And I feel confident in the fact that this year we're not having to make up a gap. We're at the top. And touch wood, we've come back. When Sheffield United have played before us and have got the win, we've then got the win. We haven't then cowered away. We've done it. And that's a difference. We didn't have to make up a ridiculous amount of points like we did do last season. If we hadn't have had such rubbish, with Willie Nonto and Sinistera and all the drama with the loan issues, we probably would have gone up last season. But anyway, let's not get onto that. It was lovely to see Gruev back. It was lovely to see Firpo back. Firpo was pivotal, in my opinion, in getting the ball up the pitch for the second goal. I think I would just like to give a nod of approval as well to whoever the defender was for Norwich, who headed the ball back in when it had taken a deflection off Aaronson, the back of Aronson's head, I believe, and it was going to go out, and it would have gone out for a goal kick, and instead he headed it back across towards Solomon, who then obviously crossed it in for Dan James to get the second goal. So, thank you, Norwich defender, because you sealed that. You sealed your own fate with that header. Dan James just, yeah, I love their partnership, and I love seeing the different relationships that can build up. This isn't me saying I don't want to see Nonto again. This isn't me saying I don't want to see Ramazani again. This is saying how exciting it is when we have options, because Leeds United are a different beast when we have options. And this is what we were missing last year. We were missing, when Somerville went off the boil, we didn't have anybody else that Farke trusted to replace him. This year, when Dan James goes off the boil, we've got Solomon. When Dan James, when Nonto goes off the boil, when Dan James goes off, when Ramazani goes, we've got other players. Christ, we've even seen Schmidt come on for Nonto to play in the wing. So in actual fact, we could even play Schmidt as a winger as well. Maybe that's how we get Schmidt in, because we have a couple of injuries, Solomon with a tight hamstring and, Nonto's off the boil. We have options, which is what any team that wants to get promoted needs. And I will come back to that point right at the end. Let's move on to the very, very limited bad. I've put the game went a bit stale and didn't live up to the hype that we all kind of felt in the first minute. I think we all kind of like rubbed our hands together and was like, right, sit back. This is going to be a game. We are going to slaughter them. And that's not what happened. We took our foot off the gas. Norwich actually came out and they did attempt to play, but the problem, another issue that we had is because Norwich, the team is so unsettled. They were very chaotic. It was like chaos, madness ball. It reminded me, it's the second time I've mentioned him in one stream. It reminded me very much of Jesse Marsh type ball of just everybody running everywhere. And it wasn't organized chaos, it was just chaos. And that kind of, I don't know whether I'm alone in this, but it felt like that unnerved us a little bit. Farke's football is very controlled, very organized. There are, as Scott Parker would say, patterns of play. And, we have a certain way that we build up. We have a certain way that we trigger like the next step of progression. And the fact that Norwich were just all over the shop meant that we were missing quite a few of our cues. People were getting into fantastic positions, and then a player would go to pass the ball. I think there was one between, I can't remember whether it was Tanaka and Aronson or Rothwell and Aronson, where there looked to be a good ball. It wasn't far outside of Norwich's D. And the ball just completely went past Aronson and went to one of Norwich's player. It was the right idea, the wrong execution, because of the fact that everything around them was all very chaotic. And I think that just seemed to unsettle us a little bit. I've put that the ref was very card happy. I think we had something like 3 or 4 yellow cards in the first 13 minutes of the game. One was a deserved one on Sam Byram. It was a yellow card for stopping the counter attack, and but Tanaka's one was never in a million years a yellow card. And obviously there was a big uproar in, what was it, the 50th minute in the second half, and that was a yellow card. 100% Tanaka got away with one there, and I think it's incredibly telling because Farke clearly knew that it should have been a yellow, and that should have been a second yellow and a red card, because he immediately took him off. And Farke, as we all know, does not make substitutions easily. So the fact that he made substitutions in the 55th minutes, between 51 and 55 minutes, which is a good 15 minutes earlier than normal. He knew that Tanaka, no matter what he says, Tanaka should have been off. I agree the first yellow card, it felt very similar actually to the Rodon sending off against Hull in the 0-0 game last season away at Hull, because his first yellow was never a yellow, but in that game, the referee does give the second card, which was a yellow. But in this time, Tanaka was very, very lucky, and I think he knew it. I think he was chuckling as he came off. Things like that do need to be looked at when we go when we go up. When we go up to the Premier League, timings of tackles from Tanaka, from Bogle, they do need to be better. I think so far at the minute, the only ones that I would trust would probably be Ampadu and possibly even Sam Byram. They do usually make brilliantly timed tackles, but Tanaka has done a few. He gave away the penalty at Blackburn, I think, that he gave away. I can't remember. I'm sure it was. But there's been a few incidents where Tanaka has mistimed tackles. So that is something that we do need to be careful of. But that's it for the bad. And it was very picky, very, very picky. The records. So I've named it the records instead of the stats, because even though what I have to say next is quite a lot of stats, I just wanted to name it something different so that it felt something different, and it wasn't just regurgitating title cards. I love a good stat, especially when it puts Leeds in a really positive light, and I believe these next stats really, really do emphasize quite how positive Farke's football has been since the beginning of last season. So out of the 92 teams, only Man City have scored more goals since the beginning of the 23-24 season than Leeds United. Man City have scored 140 and we have scored 138. Little caveat with that is, out of the 92, we have kept the most clean sheets. We have kept 37 clean sheets since the beginning of the 23-24 season. 16 of those have been this season. We I've got a little Dan James stat, because he's broken a Leeds United record, and my love of Dan James just keeps on getting stronger. He now has the record that when scoring at Elland Road, we have won the last 16 games, which is the most of any Leeds United player throughout our history. And I couldn't think of a better person that stat is about. He really deserves a place at a home at Leeds United. It took him a long time. It was a journey to get him here. And then it was a journey to get him to be able to play in his position and to not be shipped out to London-based teams that refuse to play him. He has never complained. He has just gotten on with things, all whilst developing and growing into the best version of himself that he has been. And he is an absolute, he is a warrior. None of your Max Verbers or anybody like that. Dan James is a warrior. He just gets on with it, and he's contributing so many. I think he's on, is it 10 goal contributions so far this season? I think 7 goals, 3 assists. I'm sure he's at least on 10. But I love it. I really, really do. And I think that just says so much more, and I'm so glad that he's got a song. I'm so glad, because he really does deserve it, and I know I have a massive bias when it comes to him, but part of the reason that I do have such an affinity to him is a lot of my favourite kind of previous players have that kind of lovable, rogue, hardworking, little bit of a shithouse, like I love Alioski, Click, hardworking individuals, probably crazy, especially crazy with with Alioski, but just hardworking and on their day contribute a hell of a lot. So yeah, that's just my little Dan James loving there. My final point, which is what I said earlier on, as I'm recording this, it was Farke's press conference earlier on, in which I took it that he kind of threw down the gauntlet because obviously we had Parag and a lot of the other big hitters at the game last night. And he threw down the gauntlet in my opinion, in that presser. You know, he came out and he said, "We need another striker." He said, "We need a 10 because if Aronson, you know, we need cover for that position." He said even though it was brilliant news about Struijk hopefully being back on the pitch in a couple of weeks, he doesn't want to necessarily take that risk if obviously we find a player that meets the requirements, good value, wants to come, you know, so all of those kind of attributes have to align. But he actually said it, which since the end of the last transfer window, when he says that, you know, obviously he told the board last January that we needed to start planning for Somerville and Rutter leaving. This is the first time that he has come out and kind of said, "This is what I need." And for me, that's a big statement. And I don't think he says that unless there's something in the pipeline. I'll hold my hands up if I'm wrong. When it gets to the 4th of February and we've not signed anyone, I will admit that I was wrong, but I really, really do feel that that was, you know, a hell of a gauntlet being thrown down. But let me know what your thoughts are. Um, Let me know what you think of the analysis. Let me know if any of those little stats that I've just pulled out where it tickled your fancy. Um, Also, let me know if you think that we're going to get any of those players, 9, 10, centre back. If we're going to get all three, one, two, three, what do you think that we need? Do we need all three? Do we just need one? Do we need two? Do we not need any? Yeah, let me know. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel generous, then please become a channel member. Okay, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.